Hey, it's Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, and welcome to the Black Belt Leadership Podcast, where each week I'm giving you tips, tools, insights, and resources to help you become a better version of who you are and what you do as you discover, develop, and deploy your own Black Belt leader within. Just a few months ago, my wife and I had an opportunity to visit Tampa Bay, Florida. And while we were there, we had some friends take us down to Tarpon Springs, which is the sponge capital of the world. We got to spend an amazing day touring that city, eating some great food, and that evening they drove us back to the beach where we had an opportunity to watch an incredible sunset right there on the ocean. So, what about you? Have you ever had an opportunity to visit the ocean and to watch the sunrise or a sunset? Or maybe you found yourself standing in a field or on top of a hill or looking off into the distance as the sun rose or the sun set, or just looking off into the distance and seeing something amazing. Well, that line where the sky meets the land or the sea is what's known in scientific terms as the horizon. That is the farthest point that you and I can see from our specific vantage point at the moment. It's that boundary where the Earth's surface and the sky seem to connect. Now, interestingly enough, depending on where you and I may be standing, our ability to see far into the distance, believe it or not, is somewhat limited. Now, if you're at sea level, again, describing what I saw at Tampa Bay, and let's assume you're 6 feet tall, or if you're listening to this outside the United States, 1.8 meters tall, you can see about 3 miles away. That's about 4.8 kilometers. However, if you happen to be standing on the summit of Mount Everest, 26,032 feet at elevation, guess what? You can see a little bit farther than 3 miles. When you're standing on the summit of Mount Everest, you can literally see about 200 miles away. Actually, 209 by most estimates. That's about 336 kilometers. Now, even better, if you had the opportunity to look out the window of the International Space Station, guess how far you can see when it comes to the horizon? Roughly 1,400 miles, 2,250 kilometers in distance. Now, why is that the case that as we go higher, we can see farther? Well, I want you to think about the fact that the Earth is round. And because the Earth is round, the surface actually curves away from you and I as observers. And as it curves away, it blocks our view of distant objects. So this creates a mathematical, geometric limit to how far you and I can see as we look toward the horizon. Now, that also explains why the sun and other objects disappear bottom first as they go beyond the horizon. Now, it also speaks to what I shared just a few minutes ago, that the higher your vantage point, the farther the horizon is, and the more of the Earth's surface that you and I can see. Now, why is that the case? Because altitude extends your line of sight so that you can see farther along the curvature of the Earth before your vision is ultimately blocked by the Earth's curvature. So the higher we go, the farther that you and I can see. But believe it or not, this understanding of the Earth and its curvature is really a relatively new concept in terms of humans' existence on the Earth for thousands and thousands of years. What do I mean? Well, for years, understand this. Many people around the world believed that the world was flat. Now, the idea of a flat Earth has its ancient roots in very early civilizations. For example, the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians both believed that the world was a flat disk, kind of like an island floating on the ocean. Even many ancient Israelites imagined the earth in a similar fashion. Now, the ancient Greek poet Homer and many of his contemporaries also described earth as a flat disk resting on the shield of Achilles that was surrounded by an ocean. One Greek scholar actually described the earth this way. He said, "The earth is flat and rides on air. In the same way, the sun and the moon and the other heavenly bodies, which all are fiery, ride the air because of their flatness." Now, even the ancient Norse and the ancient Germans believed that the world was flat. They too believed it was a giant island surrounded by an ocean. The ancient Chinese believed the earth was flat and square. and that it floated inside of a sphere that contained the sun, the moon, and the stars. Many ancient Chinese used the example of an egg, the flat part of the egg being the Earth's surface and the round shell representing the sphere that contained the sun, the moon, and the stars. So, as a result of these ancient beliefs, many of these tribal people groups believed that if you traveled too far, you would ultimately fall off the end of the earth, and that would result in calamity, and you and those that went with you would never return. Now, this fear was based on a limiting belief and a lack of understanding about the world as we know it today. But this fear, this limiting belief, restricted travel, and it relegated mankind to limiting their exploration to only the world that they knew at the time. They didn't venture into the unknown because they feared falling off the earth and never to return. So venturing into the unknown became a cultural taboo, and that left much of the world as we know it today undiscovered and unexplored. Curiosity gave way to status quo, and for centuries, mankind remained content to remain where they were, as they were, unchanged. But while the status quo has great power, remember, leaders challenge the status quo to change things for the better. Thank you, Carly Fiorina. Now, let's look at where things begin to change with respect to the horizon. Greek mathematician Pythagoras declared the earth was a sphere in the 6th century BC. And not only did he make that declaration, he provided geometric evidence to back up his claims. By the 2nd century BC, Ptolemy had derived maps of the globe, complete with latitude and longitude. Now, Eratosthenes established the Earth's spherical shape as a physical fact, and he even went so far as to calculate the circumference of the world around 240 BC. But interestingly enough, this knowledge, even though mathematically demonstrated, continued to be ridiculed, it continued to be mocked, and for many, many centuries, it continued to be refuted by other, quote, learned people of the day. But here's what I can tell you. At the end of the day, the skeptics were ultimately proved wrong. One example, 1492. A Spaniard by the name of Christopher Columbus set sail on a quest to demonstrate that he could actually reach the West by sailing east. He wanted to demonstrate that you could go across this vast ocean that we now know as the Atlantic, and he could find his way to Asia by sea and getting a faster route to Asia than going across the continent. Now, in doing so, we know that Christopher Columbus accidentally discovered the Americas and ultimately returned a hero. But at the end of the day, he forever debunked the myth that the earth was flat, and once you went over the edge of the horizon, you didn't fall into the oblivion, you could return from whence you came. Unless you believe one and done was not enough, between 1519 and 1522, the Portuguese explorer Magellan, he circumnavigated the globe. He proved once and for all that an individual could literally sail around the world and return to the point of origin. So he further demystified the belief that the earth was flat, and that belief had held the world in check for centuries, but now no more. So Columbus, Magellan, and the other men who followed, they were willing to challenge the status quo. These individuals believed that there was much more out there than what could be seen by the naked eye. They believed there were things beyond their vantage point that were waiting to be seen. They believed that there were things beyond the horizon waiting to be revealed. Now, these individuals, Columbus, Magellan, and other individuals like them, in these early years of our existence, were willing to venture into the unknown. They were willing to travel beyond the horizon to discover and to see what is yet to be unseen and yet to be discovered. They were willing to go where no one had gone before. They were willing to do what nobody else was willing to do, and they were willing to gamble their very lives and those of their crew to pursue their passion and their calling and to explore the unknown. Now, this, my friends, is leadership. Now, why is this important? Because leaders, by default, challenge the status quo. Leaders are the individuals who are willing to venture beyond the horizon and set foot into the land of the unknown. Now, believe it or not, we all did this when we were young. I mean, think back to your early childhood. From the time that you and I were born, guess what? We were explorers. Just like Columbus, just like Magellan, we were exploring our own little world. Now, the world around us, whether it was a playpen, a bedroom, a house, or a backyard, it was a place of daily curiosity. That world, no matter how small or how big it was to us in the moment, that world beckoned us to venture into the unknown and to explore and to discover what we had not yet learned. Every single day as we grew up as children, every single day was a new adventure. It was an opportunity to learn something new. And as a result of that, we learned, we grew, and that's what our lives was. It was a constant venture beyond the horizon into the unknown. I mean, think about it. From discovering our fingers and toes to learning how to crawl, how to sit, how to stand, how to teeter and totter back and forth, to stumble and fall, and ultimately begin to take those very few first awkward steps until we learn to walk and later to run. And then from there, what happened? Curiosity continued. We again ventured beyond the horizon and into the unknown as we learned to feed ourselves, to dress ourselves, and to bathe ourselves. We learned to read. We learned to write. We learned to ride a bicycle. We learned to listen. We learned to talk. We learned to sing. We learned to dance. We climbed trees. We learned to swim. And we learned to engage and interact with other people. Every single day of our lives as children and as young people growing up, we challenge the status quo. Every single day of our lives, we ventured beyond the horizon of what we knew to discover what was yet to be learned, to be applied, and to ultimately become a bigger and better version of who we already were. Think about it. We went to school. We played sports. We played in a marching band. We sang in a choir. We learned math. We learned science. We learned history. We learned other things in school. And all along the way, we began to dream about what we would become one day when we grew up. And then, sadly, for far too many of us, something happened. We lost our curiosity. We stopped learning and we stopped applying. We ended up settling for who we were right then, what we were right then, and we ceased striving to become a better version of ourselves. What ultimately happened? We shifted into retreat mode. That's right, retreat mode. Now, I want you to think about what that means, because when you and I stop learning and when you and I stop growing, we cease to move forward. And as a result of that, our horizon in return begins to shrink. Our perspective, our view of the world around us shifts from wondering what's beyond the horizon that we've not yet seen, heard, or discovered to only be willing to see what we've already seen. When we stop moving forward, we're no longer exploring, we're no longer investigating, we're not taking new ground. We're rehashing the same steps over and over again and never going anywhere new. And maybe what we don't realize that's happening as we're in retreat mode is we're not only failing to move forward, we're actually giving back all the gains that we previously realized when we were curious, when we were young, when we were learning, growing, and becoming a better version of who we are and what we do. When we stop moving forward and we begin to give up the gains that we've realized, our destiny begins to dim in the distance because the world is moving forward whether we're moving forward or not. And as our destiny dims in the distance, what happens? It ultimately vanishes. And at the end of the day, we end up giving up or even stopping to try. It's kind of like in American football. When the referee throws that yellow penalty flag, what happens? The team that is penalized has the ball moved in the opposite direction of where they're trying to go to score a goal. So now, not only do they have to keep moving the ball forward, they've now got to make up for that additional distance they lost because of that penalty to ultimately get to the end zone and to score and increase the score of the game. But I want you to think about that. In this example, when we get into retreat mode, we're actually penalizing ourselves. We're throwing the yellow flag on ourselves and moving ourselves in the opposite direction of the way we want to go. And at the end of the day, it's pushing us further and further away from that destiny that we envisioned when we were young, when we were curious, and we were excited about what life had to offer. We've given up on what awaits for us beyond the horizon. So what happens? We end up settling for less. And sadly, we're okay with settling for less. Because for many of us, it's easier to make excuses to justify not doing anything and being content to remain where we are and as we are than it is to own the fact that we're not moving forward and go back and make up the distance we've lost and start moving forward and gaining ground once again. It's easier to make excuse than to take the risks that are required to learn and to grow and to get better at who we are or what we do. It's easier to make an excuse than to rejoin the journey of discovery and ultimately venture beyond the unknown. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to tell you, but here's the truth. This is not leadership. If you are in retreat mode, guess what? You're not even leading yourself, much less leading other people. Now, it's important to remember that leaders lead. Leaders first lead themselves. And after they've learned to lead themselves, then they've got the opportunity and the privilege and the responsibility to lead others. Important to remember, leaders go first. Leaders are willing to step into the unknown and go where other people fear treading a foot. These are the individuals that are willing to pick up the machete, to hack their way into the jungle, and to carve out a trail for a distant destination they can't yet see, creating a path for those that are going to follow. Leaders make the path for following easier for those who will follow their lead. So think about what leaders do. Leaders, like we saw in the examples I shared above, like Columbus, like Magellan, like these amazing trailblazers of the past, they chart the course. They raise the sail and they steer the ship towards the setting sun. And they do so with the confident belief that there's something more beyond the horizon, and they're going to pursue it with all that's within them. And whatever is there, they're not going to stop until they discover it. Well, I'm here to tell you this. Leaders don't live in retreat mode. Leaders thrive as they live in the advance mode. Think about it this way. If you go as far as you can see, guess what? When you get there, you're going to be able to see farther than you can see right now. Now, that's a big benefit to understanding that while we may not be able to see beyond the horizon today, as we keep moving forward, our view of what's in front of us is going to expand. Not only are leaders going to keep moving forward, leaders are going to go higher. They're going to improve their view of the world around them by improving their perspective. Because when they expand their view of the horizon by elevating their perspective, guess what? Leaders can see more. And not only can they see more from that higher vantage point, by going higher, they can also see before others see what they're viewing. And guess what? What they discover as they're venturing into the unknown is not only their ability to see more, and not only their ability to see before doesn't just happen when they reach their first destination. That ability to see more and to see before is enhanced all along the journey, because they understand as they elevate their position, as they go farther down the horizon, the path that they're going, the direction that they're moving, the destination that they are moving towards is going to become clearer. It's going to become larger. It's going to become more defined as they get ever closer to that point in the distance that at one point in their lives was only a speck. And now it's grown in size and stature until it's much more defined than it was. More and more is revealed as they journey forward. And at the end of the day, the journey itself becomes an adventure. It's the adventure that we experienced when we're young. I remember taking my kids when they were young to visit the Rocky Mountains. We were on the way to Colorado Springs, Colorado, and we were going to go and visit Pikes Peak. My kids had never done that, and I thought, what an opportunity. So we got in a car and we drove. We drove to Dodge City, Kansas, and took a tour of the old cowboy town. And then from there, we started to drive across Colorado. And as we got closer, off in the distance, you could see the speck that was the Rocky Mountains. And as my kids looked at that, they said, "Dad, is that it?" And I just laughed because I'd been there before. And I said, "Yes, that's it. But wait till we get closer." And as we continue to drive, those mountains continue to rise, coming from the bottom up. And as we got to Colorado Springs, Colorado, and my kids could see the height and the depth and the majesty of these incredible Rocky Mountains, their mouths hung open in excitement. They realized that as we moved closer, that the objects that once were specks in the distance were now clear, and they were very much defined, and they couldn't wait to get to the top of the mountain to see what they could see. And it's interesting, as I shared, our perspective on the ground, we could only see so far. But once we got to the top of Pikes Peak and we're looking off into the distance, we could literally see for miles and miles and miles. I love to say about leaders, when it comes to leading, leaders are the kids who never grew up. And I embrace that statement because the leaders are the kids that never grew up. They just got wiser along the way. But guess what? They didn't lose the curiosity they had as children. They keep looking for ways to learn, to grow, to apply, to improve, and to become a better version of who they are and what they do. And I hope that's the same for you. So let me pose a question. What's beyond your horizon that you're looking at right now? What is it that exists beyond your current field of view? On July 16th, 1969, mankind sought to do something they had never done before, to explore an even more vast horizon than the horizons of Earth. This took place as three men left the confines of Earth in a small capsule, and they traveled across the ocean of outer space to a place called the moon. 4 days later, July 20, 1969, the very first human beings landed on the surface of the moon. And that was confirmed by Neil Armstrong's epic announcement, "Houston, the Eagle has landed." Now, for the astronauts and for all of us as humanity, what was it? It was a different ocean to explore than the oceans that we'd explored up to this point. This ocean, the vast ocean of space. And if you think about where we've gone from 1969 to today, we've explored the moon. We visited Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune and Pluto and Venus and Mercury. We've even visited the sun. Now we have satellites that are venturing deep into the horizon of space, ever exploring and ever discovering what's beyond the horizon. Now, it was in 1969 that Neil Armstrong sent back that historic photo of a round Earth sitting on a black backdrop of space. Now, if there was ever a naysayer up until that point that said the Earth was flat, I believe in that moment the naysayers were silenced because we could see this round, beautiful globe staring and shining back at us from the face of the moon. Now, fast forward a few decades later, and the International Space Station circles a spherical Earth 16 times a day from an altitude of 399 kilometers. That's 248 miles at a speed of 17,500 miles an hour. Now, for those of you overseas, that's 28,000 kilometers an hour. Now, think about that. Every 90 minutes, that International Space Station is circling the Earth. That means the astronauts on the space station are experiencing 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every single day. Now, you talk about perspective. From the edge of space, humanity can see 47 billion light years to the edge of the cosmological horizon. That's 470 billion kilometers, some 282 billion miles. Now, that is a lot of perspective. But to me, it's a not so subtle reminder that when you go higher, you can also see farther. So my question is this: as a leader, how far do you want to see? You're only limited by how high you can go as you learn, as you apply, and as you develop yourself as a leader. So my question to you is this: how far do you want to go? How high do you want to grow? How much farther can you lead other people when you, as a leader, are willing to change your perspective? And by that, I mean change the altitude at which you view your leadership and where you're taking your team as a leader. You got to remember, life is always in motion. You're either retreating or you're advancing, one of the two. There is no standing still. As I said earlier, if you choose to remain where you are, as you are, unchanged, you've put yourself in retreat mode by default. Your purpose, your identity, and your destiny is ultimately going to retreat in the distance and ultimately disappear from your view. Every moment that you choose to remain stagnant and unmoving, whether you realize it or not, you're taking another step backwards. And that's moving you farther and farther in the wrong direction from where you need to go. So my question is this: what's on your horizon that should be getting closer, should be getting bigger, and should be becoming more clear each day? If that's not happening as you're looking forward, then guess what? You may be looking forward, but you're not moving forward. And there's a big difference between the two. So here's my challenge to you as I wrap up this week's podcast episode. I want to challenge you to be a Pythagoras, be a Ptolemy, be an Aristophanes, and go challenge the status quo of thinking. That groupthink mindset that says it's always been this way, and if you come up with anything new and different, we're going to poo-poo it. We're going to ridicule it. We're going to make fun of it. We're going to believe what we've always believed, and we're not going to change. We're going to stay where we are, as we are, unchanged. I want to challenge you to be a Columbus, be a Magellan, set sail for the horizon, and I want you to get out there and prove the naysayers wrong. I want you to go be a Neil Armstrong. I want you to reach for the stars and ultimately have the opportunity to plant your feet on a far distant land. Now, why do I say these things? Because that's what black belt leaders do. They understand that what got them to where they are today isn't going to get them where they need to be tomorrow. So every day they're learning, they're growing, they're applying, and they're doing what's necessary to become a better version of who they are and what they do. So I want to challenge you, go as far as you can go, knowing that when you get as far as you can see, you're going to be able to go farther and see farther all along the way. I want to challenge you to go as high as you can go, knowing that when you get there, you're going to realize you can go higher. And as you go higher, you can see even farther. So what's on your horizon? But more importantly, what's beyond your horizon? What's way out there beckoning you, waiting to be discovered? That, my friend, is the journey of a leader. To have the opportunity to boldly go where no man, where no woman has gone before. What's beyond your horizon? What's out there waiting for you to discover what's there? I'm Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.